Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, number 2 of our series on Melissa Mathison, the Scribbler, with her film she wrote for Steven Spielberg, 1982's E.T., the Extra-Terrestrial. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you are a regular listener of the show and you're interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great films, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page at patreon.com/thenextreel.
We got a Blot Spot, Andy, friend of the show. Ben Lott has written in with his rebound on The Black Stallion.
Yes, he did. A beautiful piece of filmmaking. I love how it's almost a silent film for long stretches, and they allow the visuals to tell the story. I have some issues with it, but in general, I find the charm outweighs the flaws. Your rank 58, my rank 57. Pretty close there.
Yeah, almost a perfect blot.
Almost. We haven't had one of those I think we've only had one of those, right?
I think we've had one of those, yeah. It's hard to find those anymore, as perfect blots.
It is.
Anyhow, Andy, it's time. Let's do trailers.
So my trailer, Pete, is kind of a little indie film from Fox Searchlight called Patty Cakes. Cakes with a $ for the S, because Patty Cakes... Patty Cakes is a story about an aspiring rapper named Patricia Dombrowski, a.k.a. Killa P, a.k.a. Patty Cakes, who is, according to IMDb, who's fighting an unlikely quest for glory in her downtrodden hometown in New Jersey. This is a really interesting looking kind of indie character story, kind of a musical character story of this young girl who just is living this kind of a down and out life, just kind of rough, and doesn't seem like she gets a lot of support from her, seems to be a single mom. And she wants to be a rap star. And you get these glimpses of her and how it really lifts her spirits and kind of helps her soul soar when she does these little rap competitions. And she connects with the right friends. It looks like, I'm guessing, her grandmother kind of kicks in as one of her supporters. And she kind of, has this kind of glow and this growing presence as the trailer goes along. I loved 8 Mile. I loved kind of that journey that Eminem's character Rabbit took through that film. This is another of those musical rap films of a character who's down and out and trying to find a way through that and uses rap to do so. And I just love everything about it. The trailer just gets me. It makes me happy. It just makes me excited. I'm really excited to see this one. I don't know anything about Jeremy Gasper, the writer-director, but from what I see here, it's definitely something that I want to check out and hopefully will enjoy quite a bit. What do you think of this one?
It totally surprised me. Like out of the blue, surprised me. I think I've heard mention or read mention of the film, in somewhere online. Never really gave it much thought. This is not the movie I expected, and the trailer I found compelling in and of itself. It is a perfect introduction to the story and the character. It does everything a trailer needs to do. It makes me want to learn more about this space that this woman inhabits and the transformation that, her rap allows her to achieve. It's like the 8 Mile that I wanted. So I'm really excited about it.
Don't go knocking on 8 Mile. That's a great movie.
It is a great movie. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. But this, it's I don't know. It's a mashup of a little bit more of a character that I would never expect to be in this world, and it appears from the trailer to take that fish out of water experience, and subvert it. In a way that I find really satisfying when films do this. When you take the fish out of water, but you make the fish actually an intelligent and compelling participant in the new world that they're exploring. And I'm very excited about the possibilities that come in that story. Jeremy Gasper, all I can say is I liked the video work that he's done for Selena Gomez and Florence and the Machine. And that's about it. Didn't know that he did it until I looked at his credits, but it turns out he has done those 2 videos, and I like them both. So there you go.
Well, I will say the shot that I love the most, or the moment that I just think totally just won me over, as if the trailer hadn't already done so, is the moment where Grandma in her wheelchair puts the little face mask down so that she can pose in the photo that they're taking of their group. It's
totally
fantastic. Great stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, this, like I said, it's been kind of a festival hit since the beginning of the year, starting in Sundance and South by Southwest. And it's just really made its way around, doing a lot of festivals. And it's going to have a U.S. opening August 18th, and then France the 30th, UK September 1st, Sweden October 6th, and Germany November 2nd. That's all the release dates we have so far, but definitely going to check this one out when it comes out.
My trailer, Andy, is Landline from director Gillian Robespierre and writers Gillian Robespierre and Elizabeth Holm, along with some other folks. Stars Jenny Slate, Finn Wittrock, John Turturro, Edie Falco, Jay Duplass is in it, along with a couple other faces that were really fun to see in this movie. It's a story of a teenager living with her sister and parents in New York, And it is clearly a story of coming of age and coming to understand her relationship with her sister. And then they discover that their father's having an affair, and it becomes kind of a fun, weird detective story as they try to unravel the relationships and read the emails and explore the sort of hidden corners of her father's world. And I found it really intriguing. It's a mashup of stories that I really enjoy. I mean, I like the weirdness and the comedy of her navigating the world as a teenager, kind of trying to figure out who she is in the space. I love the way she is, she's trying to understand her relationship with her sister and her mother in particular. And John Turturro is always a treat to see on screen. I love this guy. And the whole movie, I think it had me really curious, which is, again, it did what it needed to do as a trailer. What'd you think?
Yeah, that's what I would say I felt after watching this. It piqued my curiosity. I think the story looks pretty interesting. It could be something that may end up kind of not working for me, but at the same time, I loved the characters. I thought that it was an interesting family dynamic going on here. That I thought it was a really interesting story element to blend the daughter who's engaged to be married to someone that she's not that keen on marrying, struggling with that while also struggling with this idea that dad might be having an affair, and kind of the perspective that puts into her head and into the viewer's head of how people get into these situations. It was kind of a really interesting story element that I hadn't seen before. It actually opened up potentially some interesting angles. And so I think there could be some of that in here. And you're right, John Turturro is just always fantastic. He looks great in this. And I mean, it looks like an interesting thing. It might be more of a renter for me, but it still was something that piqued my curiosity.
It's been circulating on the festival circuits over the last half of the year, and it opens for us in the United States July 21st, 2017. So it's coming right around the corner next month. We have no release for anywhere else. I'm sorry.
Oh.
He's a man from outer space, and we're taking him to his spaceship, Andy.
In this quiet neighborhood, on this tranquil street, a mystery is unfolding. And an adventure is beginning.
I'm keeping you. E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home?
E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Andy, Steven Spielberg.
I believe that's a hyphen, Pete. Come on, get it straight.
You're right. You're right. I appreciate that correction. Here we go. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial.
Now you're talking.
Better? Good?
Now you're
Good?
talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. As long as we need to get it right. This is the 1982 film, if you haven't heard of it, from director Steven Spielberg and writer Melissa Mathison. Stars Dee Wallace, our friend Dee Wallace, who gets top billing because she's our friend.
That's right.
And she called us wussies. Yeah, the young Henry Thomas as Elliot, Robert McNaughton, Drew Barrymore, and C. Thomas Howell. I throw him in there because I like him. And,
yes. It's fun to see him.
There's some others. There's some other great people. This is a great little cast, and it is. If you haven't heard of what this film is about, it's a story of a boy who's having some trouble in the world, and he befriends a friendly alien to help him see it through. And it turns out this movie was reasonably popular. How did it hit you on this watch?
This is a movie I can watch anytime, and it just totally sweeps me away. The magic of this film is something special, I think. It's I want to get into a brief conversation at some point. It doesn't have to be this second, but about the idea of filmmakers who make films that are really kind of focused on emotion versus films that are more of an intellectual type of film. Because some people in a Facebook group that I'm in were talking about the balance between the two, and is it are films that are more emotional, that tap into emotion, are they more overrated? because people get emotionally invested in them, does that mean that they may not be as good, but people think they're good because they're emotionally invested? And, I kind of disagreed with that point quite a bit, because I feel like, there's a real strength to filmmakers who know how to tap into emotion within people and find that connection. I think it's a very important thing. And I don't think just because it's emotion that you can dismiss it because it's not intellect. And Spielberg, I think, is a very smart filmmaker. And I think he knows how to use the smarts that he has in making his films, and has plenty of smarts in his films, but also knows how to tap into the emotion. And I think he balances quite well, even if sometimes he does do a little bit more of the emotion in his films than the intellect. I think this film taps into the emotion that I have very easily. It always has. It's just a beautiful story. I feel like it's just a very honest story, really interesting characters and what they're going through. Going back to Melissa Mathison and what we talked about last week with The Black Stallion, how she really writes this just honest sense of people and characters. And everything here just feels really honest and interesting and engaging. It's an easy watch. It's a great one to watch with the family, and I had an amazing time.
I feel like you just dropped 15 different things for me to respond to there, and that's a little bit unfair. I got to go back first to this.
Let's rewind.
Intellect, please. This intellect versus emotion nonsense that your so-called friends are spouting. What? Can you give me a contrasting film? I assume E.T. is the film that you're using as the anchor for the filmmaker as emotional conduit angle.
That's what I was using now. But I mean, people were talking
give me the intellectual. And can you do it with a Spielberg film? Is there a Spielberg film that it tends to be more intellectual?
Munich.
Oh,
I'd say
good.
Munich.
Okay.
I'd even say AI. If we're sticking specifically
That's
to
the one
alien films,
yeah.
I would go AI versus E.T. Now, AI has some emotion in it, and some of that stuff doesn't work really well. And I think that personally, I feel it has a lot of story issues. But I think there are a lot of interesting intellectual things happening within that film. So I think if you look at Spielberg just specifically for intellect versus emotion, I think those are two very good directions you could take.
I am having trouble not really hating that question. Why do people go to movies if not to connect first emotionally and then intellectually? It's why the form exists.
To a certain extent. I mean, I would argue that there is a value in what filmmakers can do to explore thought. And I think there are plenty of intellectual films out there. I mean, look at 2001. That's a much more of an intellectual sort of film that I find very intellectually stimulating, engaging, interesting, exciting. I love what that film does. I don't know if I connect emotionally to it, but I love thinking about that particular film. There are plenty of filmmakers who tell those sorts of stories. They may not be the ones that the masses go to. I think that they are very just smart. I think that the filmmakers are exploring ideas, and I love that aspect of cinema as well. And I struggle personally with people who like to segregate so much and just say, I prefer the intellectual sorts of films. These emotional ones are garbage. I think that there's value in both, and that's my argument, is that there's an incredible value in both types of films.
It's bunk. It's not emotion. It's the bunk, Andy. The whole point. Even I disagree with you categorizing 2001 as a strictly an intellectual film. I can't connect with 2001 unless I am connecting with it first emotionally, unless I am dealing with the sort of the despair at the coming wash of technology. Right? That's an emotional response. Right? That is a deep emotional response, and it doesn't even, I can't even open the door to thinking about what the film is about until I am engrossed in it at some emotional level. I have a really hard time imagining a film that succeeds that doesn't offer me a connection, an emotional connection first. I can't picture it.
Well, that's good.
That's why the whole conversation is it's kind of a ridiculous thing. I think this ties right back into E.T. It opens the emotional door, absolutely. And to your point, Melissa Mathison is exceptional at writing, as we talked about last week, particularly very human, heroic children, right? I mean, the relationships that these kids have, our ability to, as even I find myself as an adult put myself in my kind of 10-year-old self watching this movie thinking, man, I could have been that kid. I wanted to be that kid. He was aspirational for me. That is a true gift of her, of hers as a screenwriter, and Spielberg in capturing this particular segment of kind of white middle-class suburban America. Right. That was a real gift of his at this period of his filmmaking. It's really where he was coming from. And so that obviously connects very strongly with me. But I think it's my hunch is it's a more universal picture, than just the cultural pieces of it. But the real issue for me, and the question is, and I will say this with a preface, that this is still a 5-star movie and a like for me. It is at the very top of some of my favorite film lists. It's just great. But when watching it this time around, when the film changes course from, halfway through the film, from the wonderful childlike wonder of the experience of meeting the alien and learning the alien and language and all of this great stuff, to here we are, the feds have come in, and there is perhaps an expectation of a little bit more sort of filmmaking pragmatism that is not on display. It maintains the sort of frivolousness from the first half of the film and applies it to the feds. Does it maintain its that sense, that sort of emotional connection once you are presented with this sort of odd kind of worlds collide montage of experience in the last half of the film? I think there is certainly an argument to be made about how we perceive the film through the eyes of these kids and from the perspective of these kids, and I think that absolutely that maintains, in fact, and may be a driving factor behind why the adults are portrayed the way they are in the end of the film. But it's something that really struck me, and I'm not sure how well it landed this time.
I guess I have no problem with that. I see what you're saying, how they might be a little more big and cartoonish, and certainly not always acting like perhaps FBI agents should. I guess I just don't have a problem with that. I feel like they're honest enough within context of the story being told here. I mean, you're right. If this was Zero Dark 30 sorts of FBI agents, we'd be watching a very different last half of the movie. And I don't think that's exactly what we're going for here. I mean, it is something that is for the whole family. And so I think it's a little bigger, and I think the actions may not be as accurate as to how they actually would have been portrayed. So I don't have any issues with that. I think it all works very nicely. In fact, if you look at something more recently like Monster Trucks, with how the feds were portrayed in that movie, I mean, it's cartoonish and embarrassing in that particular film. And I think what they did in E.T., yes, it was bigger and it fits within context of the family story that they're telling here and this world that they've created for this particular film. But it still is more honest and allows for a better sense of a realism, even if it is from the kid's perspective. So I think it works nicely, and I'm glad that it is the way it is.
Well,
not Zero Dark 30.
I'm so glad E.T. is not Zero Dark 30. Very different movie. I don't think I disagree with you either. And in fact, I watch the movie, I watch it with my kids, and their sense of just love for the film all the way through is, I just go back to this argument of emotion intellectualism. And if there is a sense in intellectual filmmaking that there's an expectation of emotions to open the door, but at least some intellectual anchor to hang your hat on while you're actually watching the film, that's where E.T. may be criticized for me. That may be an area where not including more of the pragmatic, not including an area of the more pragmatic feds that we have come to expect is a shortcoming in the film, and allows those who who have cold, dark, stone hearts would actually not connect with this film at all. They're dead inside, those people.
It's an interesting way to kind of approach the film and just look at it. But I do feel that Melissa Mathison is the screenwriter here, writing this whole concept that Spielberg had really come up with. She tapped into the whole concept of telling this story that is much more from the younger perspective. I mean, look what Spielberg did in Close Encounters. I mean, it was a little more realistic in that particular film, but it was designed for an older audience. This wasn't designed. I mean, honestly, actually, you think you listen to Spielberg talking about this film. It sounds like they were really not expecting it to do much. They were kind of expecting it to be kind of this film that moms would take their kids to, and that would really kind of be the only audience that would go see it, because kid films weren't as huge at that particular period of time, and everyone was kind of looking at this as this kids film. And Spielberg was kind of making it and having a great time making it, but he was in their back of their minds. I think they're all kind of like, well, hopefully people like it, but it's probably just going to be some kids film. In context of what they are really doing in their world building within the film, I think they were telling it honestly.
I agree. And in that light, when you look at things like the feds rolling the giant, rolling tube that is actually designed to be collapsed to carry on a truck, but they're rolling it up the street in order to put it
makes for
place.
A pretty shot. We want backlight, Pete.
There is full of that just ridiculousness in the unnamed and generally silent feds, right? They are. This film, I couldn't help but think of this film as Jaws with aliens, except for the feds or the shark. We never see them, and when we do, they kind of break down. Melissa Mathison, she is often, I think, credited with this being a film that she wrote her first draft, and it became the shooting script, which would make you say, wow, that's impressive. What really happened, as I gather it, is she would write a bunch. She would write for 5 days straight, and then she would go workshop with Steven, and then go write some more for 5 days straight, and workshop a whole bunch with Steven, because this was so much of it was his story. It was a story about his family, the imaginary friend that he invented in the 60s as his family was divorcing. It was a story that he was planning on making and growing up, an idea about his divorce, the family's divorce when he was a kid. And a combination of, being disgruntled about not wanting to have Close Encounters have a sequel, but also not wanting anyone else to make it. So trying to find a way to navigate the studio waters there. And she ended up taking this hodgepodge of incredible ideas and turning it into an organized story quickly. I don't know if it's fair to say it's first draft.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a rough way to describe it. I think it's one of those fun production stories that they're going to always tell the rest of their lives. It's like, that's the best first draft I've ever read. Right, but there was a lot that went into that first draft. But it makes for great storytelling, and it's exciting. And so I can see why they like to spin it that way. But that being said, I will say, coming off of The Black Stallion and then this, I think Melissa just as this type of storytelling she does connect with very strongly. And just knowing that she had been, like when Coppola met her, that she was like a babysitter, it just makes sense. Like the fact that she knows how to connect with kids on their level. What was interesting watching some of the behind the scenes footage is that she was on set all the time, like kind of working with Steven if they were doing any rewrites or whatever. She was kind of coaching the kids on their lines and working stuff with them, and she would pull stuff that they would say and integrate it into the script and everything. So she was always around and always like being a part of things. And I think that's a real, just a benefit to have a writer involved in that way in the script. And I know it doesn't happen that often, but I think just a blessing in this particular case for Melissa to be around to help Steven really kind of continually modify this as the story progressed. Yeah,
certainly a gift to have her on set, and that he understands the value of having the screenwriter on set, which is a bit of a rarity. The genesis of this film, I think, is really interesting, and I don't know that I'd ever put together where all these ideas ended up filtering out into Steven's canon. That this script, along with this commissioned script that he had John Sayles write for Night Skies, which was, I gather, supposed to be that sequel of Close Encounters, the proposed sort of, could have been sequel where one of, the aliens were terrorizing a suburban family and one of them befriended his family's son. I'm not sure I understand the difference between that and this other idea where, perhaps one of the aliens from Close Encounters didn't actually make it back onto the ship and stayed on Earth, and that became part of the story. But in the end, essentially sales ideas from Spielberg from Night Skies ended up being split at the id. So the happy part became the befriended son of the befriended son, and the alien became E.T., and the terrorized part became Poltergeist. And in that sort of sibling relationship between those two films makes much more sense to me now.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting blend. It was a very interesting time for Spielberg to be balancing these particular two stories, Poltergeist and E.T., just totally different types of filmmaking, and two fantastic films that he was involved in one way or the other. So maybe one day we'll talk about Poltergeist on the show. I thought it was interesting, and I had never heard this, that there was potentially some plagiarism. Satyajit Ray, a director from India, had a script from 1967 called The Alien, and he said that there were copies of his script available around the U.S., and it was, I guess, close enough that he felt that Spielberg had read it and plagiarized his script. Spielberg denied the claim, saying he was just a kid when the script was apparently around, and there was no way that he would have done that. I honestly have no idea. I've never read it, that particular script by Satyajit Ray, but Scorsese and Richard Attenborough both kind of pointed out how there seemed to be influences from the script in the film. So, I mean, it piques my curiosity. I don't know. Knowing kind of Spielberg and just the way that he comes up with these stories, I kind of feel like, it probably was just Spielberg and just kind of coming out of his brain off of Close Encounters. So, it's just one of those interesting things. It doesn't look like it ever amounted to anything, but it is an interesting little bit of history about the particular story that I had never known.
When you look at Spielberg as a director, I feel like this is a film that really exemplifies where J.J. Abrams gets his love of flair and backlighting.
Right?
Holy cow.
Well, it certainly is something that Spielberg has done a lot in his career and has kind of continued and perfected, because you see it in most of his films. He really loves that look and the smoky room and everything.
Very smoky room. In fact, did you notice when Elliot goes and turns on the faucet to do the dishes in the opening sequence, just how quickly that wall of steam climbs up the window that's like 6 feet wide?
Right.
Every one of us watching that movie were like, that's not a sink. That's not how that works.
Yeah, and Spielberg also, another little trick that he does quite a bit is he really loves using reflections. And I love how he's always playing with those and figuring out ways to do some really interesting tricks with them. There's a fantastic one that I liked in this film. Later, when Keyes is in his little spacesuit and he's talking to Elliot, who's sick in his bed, and you have Keyes in his glass helmet looking down at Elliot, and you see the reflection of Elliot in his on his face, on the glass over his face, so you can almost have the conversation between the two people in the one shot through a reflection. Just a beautiful image, and I love how Spielberg really plays around with things like that. And it's a fun way to tell the story. And talking about kind of that intellectual and emotional way of telling stories, I think that he's so smart in the way that he directs shots and puts things together. It's masterful, and you get things like that. It happens, and you don't think about it, but it's there. And when you're evaluating the film and you're looking at it later, you see those things and you realize just how smart of a filmmaker he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And how instinctive, right? I mean, he trusts his instincts. He didn't storyboard the film. Directed with a script on 3x5 cards just so he could change the order of things on the fly. He's just incredibly adept with a camera, and I find that I watch this film, and as sort of light as we say, it's a kid's film. It is such a fantastic example of well-heeled direction.
He's also somebody who knows how to work with kids, and he's done that plenty in his films. And smartly, they decided to shoot this as chronologically as possible so that the kids could really kind of develop this emotional attachment with this alien character. and help them with their emotions as the story got to its conclusion, which is just a really smart way to do that. Paying attention to these young people who may not be able to tap into their emotions as well as adult actors, and find the right way to tell the story so that it helps them actually bring those emotions forward.
Let's talk about first shot, last shot.
Yeah, for our first shot, we pan across the night sky, which is clear and full of stars, and we go down onto a skyline of a dark woods lit by a low blue cloud cover. And then we cut to a wide shot of the alien craft.
And then the last shot, that very alien craft departs, and it leaves a rainbow skitter across the sky. And we cut to a close-up of Elliot watching the sky as the blustery trail of presumably toxic alien exhaust waste is washing over him. And then we cut to credits.
Comtrails.
Yeah, comtrails. Elliot is forever ridden with a horrible alien cancer. That's ET Part 2.
That's the part 2, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just a nice kind of a bookend of the story. We have the arrival of the aliens, the departure of the aliens, but it's not so much just, arrival and departure. Now it's kind of the connections that they've made. And we end on this shot of Elliot as he's kind of watching them go. And it's emotional, and you feel like you are Elliot watching one of your best friends leave. And I think they found a nice way to bookend it in a way where you really have the connection of these visitors.
See, Andy, it's emotional.
Absolutely.
I agree with you. I think one of the things that I love so much about the way she writes for kids' stories is the way we enter and exit the fable. And in this case, opening on a dark woods. What more symbolic way do we have to enter a fable than a dark and nameless woods? And then to see the bright lights of the alien craft and these little alien doodads moving in the bushes. There is such mystery and wonder in that experience that is the opening of the book of fairy tales, but this one's about aliens. I think it's terrific.
Yep, absolutely.
Casting by Jane Feinberg, Mike Fenton, and Marcy Learoff, and they brought us... Okay, we're going to start with Dee Wallace again, as Mom.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is just such a wonderful and touching performance from Dee that, it's always connected with me. And maybe it was because my parents were divorced, probably around the same time. I saw this shortly after my parents divorced. And I think it just always kind of stuck with me. She always has kind of seemed kind of like a mother figure for me, mainly because of this role. And it's so interesting to watch her now as an adult and see the emotions that she goes through over the course of this and the struggle she's going through as a newly single mom after her husband is kind of left with this other woman from Mexico, and just the interesting way that she's written, where she's not necessarily, it's kind of like that place where she's obviously a good parent and she cares for her kids, but she's also distracted. She's maybe a little selfish and focused on herself because of this place that she's in now. And I think it's just really touching how she brings that to fruition as the mom in this particular film.
I couldn't agree more. And talk about this point of efficiency in screenwriting, right, with Dee Wallace's character of Mary, because she ends up conveying so much in so little by way of talking about the dad who's in Mexico with the other woman, her reaction to the repeating refrain of Mexico, he hates Mexico, those little tiny lines that tell you so much about her as a character and her relationship. And actually, by the time you get to Mary, walking into the bathroom and meeting the ailing ET for the first time, her decision to take those kids out of the bathroom and run them downstairs makes sense. And being so reactionary to that ET would I think without understanding who that character is, being so reactionary to the ET wouldn't make as much sense, because we want to have more of a relationship of solidarity with the alien because of what we've had with the kids and their relationship with the alien. But because we know so much about her and her emotional state at the time, the level of protection that she's kind of exudes over those kids as a result of where she is in her marriage, I think it's just perfectly portrayed. It reminds me right back to watching the mom pivot in the conversation on the Black Stallion about whether she's going to let him ride or not. It's a little tiny scene with a character that is hardly in the film, and yet because of what we know of the character and incredible efficiency in developing that character on screen, we actually have a connection with her when she makes that pivot. And I think the same is said for Mary.
And then, of course, you have her three kids, Elliot, Michael, and Gertie, and I mean, it's a perfect little trio, and Henry Thomas leading the troupe as Elliot. What a wonderful performance he gives here. So just perfect for what he needed to do, and I love watching him in this film. It's just, you get a sense that this is really like, I mean, it's like an old soul doing this performance. He's so strong in what he's bringing to the table here.
I was amazed when I watched his improvised audition tape. They brought him in to audition and didn't give him a script. They just said, here's the deal. You are being approached by an authority figure who wants to take the alien away, and your entire job is to not let him take the alien away. Go. And one of the casting directors, I think Mike Fenton, was the voice off screen. And it's kind of a slow burn, but you watch him over the course of just a few minutes go from a sort of blank-faced kid to weeping and begging for him not to take the alien, that he can't take the alien. Please don't take the alien. And it is such a powerful turn. At the end of the clip, it's just a 3-minute clip, you hear Spielberg off screen say, okay, kid, you got the job. And that is a really moving bit of audition tape and film lore for me.
I think it speaks to why Henry Thomas got a good number of roles after this at the time. I mean, I always remember him in Cloak and Dagger for some reason. That's the other movie that is permanently ingrained in my head with him as a kid. And then Legends of the Fall. It's like in my head, he goes from that to being a grown up in that movie, and it's just such a funny jump. But I know he's been in plenty of other things, but it's just funny the things that end up sticking with you.
It's totally funny, and to see him in these other movies, it feels out of place. I'm sorry, Henry, it just feels out of place. The other kids, Robert McNaughton is Big Brother Michael.
He was the perfect big brother. I think that his reaction when he first sees ET and just the things that he does, like these guys feel like real siblings. Like when Elliot is making him promise and he's doing his little Yoda voice, he's like, "Oh, you have absolute power." Just It's like, oh, these are kids. This feels like a real family. I loved that they really got that right. And Robert McNaughton was just so great, and I think it's something that I had kind of forgotten about in the film. But when he goes on the search to find ET after ET gets lost in the forest, and he finds him in the riverbed, and it's just like that's a moment that just kind of hit me. That's like a kind of a powerful moment for Michael to have to deal with, is finding this really sick ET down there, and it's just like. It's kind of a frightening thing he's only like 14 or 15 in the film. And it's just putting that in his head. It's like, that's got to be a really kind of terrifying thing to have to confront as a child. And I thought he really did a great job here.
It's strange that he hasn't done more, like you look at his credits and it's, few and far between. He came back and did Frankenstein versus the Mummy in 2015 and Laugh Killer Laugh in 2015. Otherwise, it's a bunch of TV throughout the 80s and then a long break. So obviously at some point he made, I don't know what happened, conscious choice or what, but he didn't do much else. Drew Barrymore, on the other hand, has been very busy. She was the first of the kids to be cast as young sister Gertie.
And another just perfect example of a child actress just doing everything right. She was just brilliant in the film. And I know she's a 6-year-old, but she's just honest, and Spielberg captured all of that really brilliantly. And Drew has certainly had her ups and downs throughout her career, and she's kind of gone off the deep end a little bit. And I love how she's kind of pulled herself back, and the stuff that she's been cranking out, in the last decade or so. I really enjoy just her presence on screen now, and she's just I don't know, she's just one of those people I've always connected with, and it's probably because of this film.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Between this and Firestarter.
And irreconcilable differences.
Yeah, but mostly Firestarter. That was the big role. That was the one I wanted more than anything else.
Yeah. Right.
She got the audition largely because she lied to Spielberg. She said that she wasn't an actress, but she was a drummer in a band. I thought that was amusing, and he thought that imagination needed to be in the film. Man, did they play her in this movie. Told her that the E.T. was real, flesh and blood, and that she had to respond to it accordingly. And so when she's surprised by it, that's a pretty legit scream in the film, according to the lore.
Well, I heard that she had kind of a sense that it was fake, but she just in her head she thought it was real. And she just kind of, didn't fully get all of that stuff. I think it's hard as a 6-year-old, and she would be reacting to it because it was reacting to her. And I think that's really an interesting way to kind of take that and just process it as a kid. And she said it in her head now, thinking back to when she was young, she says it always seemed to her like it was kind of a guardian angel on the set. And so I think that's kind of an interesting way that she ended up approaching E.T. And yeah, that moment when they do the electric paddles on E.T.'s chest and she just kind of jumps out of her skin, it just bursts into tears. It just really tears your heart out.
Heart-wrenching, yes. Peter Coyote as Keys.
I love the way that Spielberg chose to tell the story and have it really from the kid's perspective, and you don't necessarily see any of these adults. It's really kind of Charlie Brown type of filmmaking, where you get adults' legs or adults in silhouette, other than Mom, who's kind of a little bit kiddish herself, but all these other adults are really just like legs down sorts of things. And I love that you don't get to really see that it's Peter Coyote until an hour and 20 minutes into the movie. We finally get that great reveal when he comes through the door in his suit, and he kind of lifts his head up, and you see him behind the mask. It's just it's a great way to kind of play this story and keep the adults out of it until the kids are kind of forced into that world, or I should say, the adults kind of take over the kids' world.
Yeah, I agree, and he becomes sort of the vessel for the adults, but does so in a way that's charming and kind of sweet and understanding, at least, as if he has more of an empathetic position in the film. He was discovered, Spielberg met him when he auditioned for the role of Indiana Jones. Apparently, during the audition, he walked in and tripped over the lights, the cabling for the lights, and that clumsiness didn't go over well for that role. But Spielberg recalled that for this, and like that clumsiness and the sensitivity for Keys in this.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
And I already mentioned C. Thomas Howell. I don't really have anything to say about him. I just like seeing him as a kid.
I think that's great. It reminds me of The Outsiders, which is another great kid performance of his. I will say, as far as the kids go, I want my own red ball cap that says Camus on it.
Yeah.
I just cracked up every time I saw that hat. I'm like, what is that kid doing wearing that hat? It's just fantastic, and it speaks so truly of the weird things that kids would wear. But I was like, I totally want that hat now.
I totally agree. That's awesome. The primary voice of the alien, I think, was Deborah Winger.
No, Deborah Winger was the voice during the early cuts, during all like she came in and did all the lines for Spielberg when they were kind of cutting it together. And so only people really saw or really heard Deborah Winger doing the voice of E.T. if you saw some of those early cuts. There might be a little bit or piece here or there of Deborah Winger left in there, but for the most part, it's all Pat Welsh, who is the voice of E.T. She's somebody who I guess really wanted to be an actress. It just never ended up working out. And somehow they ended up connecting with her, and they loved that kind of sound of her voice, and they had her do it. And she only has like 3 credits on IMDb. This, and then she was also Boosh, the voice of Boosh in Return of the Jedi, or Bausch, and something in like 1940. So her career is pretty thin and widespread, but she has a great sound, and I love the voice that she has here. But it sounds like the sound department really did a lot of work on ET, and it's like, there's 18 different contributors, whether it's people or animals or just a random crew member who belch as well to throw in for ET's belches.
That was Ben Burt's UCLA sound design instructor to professor who burped. I think that's fantastic.
Oh, it's so funny. Just so funny. But I also love that, I guess Deborah Winger is just an old friend of Steven Spielberg's, and I love that she actually ended up in the film. She's the nurse zombie who's carrying a poodle when they're going trick-or-treating. Oh, that's Deborah Winger walking by, folks. So
that's
you go.
That's awesome. I didn't catch that. And Melissa Mathison was in the film.
Yeah, she and her beau at the time, Harrison Ford, both were in it. She was the school nurse, and Harrison Ford was the principal. But I guess they were both cut. They're in a deleted scene that I didn't look for. I wonder if it's actually in the special features. But
it's actually it's there. And in fact, in our show notes, Andy, if you click on the link for Harrison Ford, Elliot's principal, you will go straight to see it. And it's very strange because it's very clearly his voice, but you only see his hands and his shoulder. Like, they never show his face.
Oh, it's like the opening of Raiders.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So I think it's fascinating. It's fascinating actually that it was cut. It's kind of a weird scene out of context. A lot of telepathy and telekinesis going on. That's out of context. We don't really know what's going on, but it's fascinating to see Harrison Ford in there. And so check that out in the show notes if you're interested. And I'll also put in the improvised audition tape. That's also on YouTube, so I'll put a link to that too. So if you're interested, swipe over to the show notes. Let's talk about getting it made.
Yeah, Spielberg started working with Kathleen Kennedy around this time, and this was kind of where she kind of got a big start with all of this sort of stuff. It's crazy looking at her filmography and how, she was an associate for Spielberg on Raiders the year before, and she was assistant to John Milius on 1941, so she was kind of in the loop already. But to go from like those roles to as her first producing credit, E.T., how does that happen? Talk about just being in the right place at the right time and being an incredibly smart producer. She's obviously produced herself time and time again with the projects that she's done with Spielberg and everybody else. She's just a really kind of quite a producing genius, I would say, and has done just some amazing stuff. Just go through her filmography as a producer, and it just is amazing film after amazing film. 92 credits on IMDb. Just a really interesting woman. And I don't think she did a great job handling this project, but again, I don't think any of them knew what they had gotten themselves into. And I think that it's great to see how it grew after this.
Cinematography by Alan Davio.
Is that how you say it?
Davio?
I think it's Davio.
I just will never know. What'd you think of the camera?
Great stuff. Alan, I think, is a really solid film cinematographer, and has proven himself plenty of times in a lot of great films. This film clearly has just some beautiful work. He's done, Spielberg seems to kind of click with certain cinematographers for certain periods of his filmmaking career. I think this was the first film they worked on together, and then they did The Twilight Zone, the movie, and some Amazing Stories stuff, and Color Purple, and Empire of the Sun. And then I think that was it. I don't think they ended up working together after that. And but I think they created some incredibly beautiful work, and the work here certainly speaks to that. Just one shot that really kind of got me excited to see is the amazing Vertigo. It's almost like a Vertigo reverse Vertigo shot, which is really cool. You get this shot of the town from the kind of overlook, and you get the kind of the dolly in zoom out as we kind of pull back, and it makes the town all of a sudden kind of retreat in the background as all of a sudden you realize there's all these FBI agents searching up at the top, and then you land on Keys, and then you do the whole thing in reverse, and you end up with this incredible shot of Keys standing there over the town, as all of a sudden the town gets like compressed behind him and under him, as if he's like this dominating force ruling over it. An incredible shot that it just, I love seeing Spielberg do the Vertigo shot that he pulled off in Jaws, and then to see him do it like this really interesting way where it was kind of a double, just even cooler.
It is very cool. It felt, that sequence in particular, and actually I should say just about everything with the feds in the first half of the film, whenever we cut to them, felt very much like Poltergeist to me. That's where it just anchored to me. Those scenes, and that shot in particular, felt so much like a shot in Poltergeist. I can't put my finger on it, but I want to see it again just because of it just feels so close in tone. And that's one of the things that I go back to, this sort of sibling relationship between these two films. It has a visual style that sort of mimics the non-horror stuff. It looks like Poltergeist. They look related to me in a way that I see. I can't think of another pairing of films that feels like that isn't part of a series.
Yeah, it's interesting, and certainly there's been speculation about how much Spielberg really had a part of in Poltergeist, but I guess it was a contractual thing where Universal they were not gonna let him direct two films in the same year, and so that's when he brought Tobe Hooper on to direct Poltergeist, and then he just produced it. It certainly sounds like he was around on set a lot on that film. I think that was done while E.T. was in kind of the final stages of development and in pre-production. But I mean, Spielberg himself says, it's Toby's film. Toby directed it. He made the choices. I was there. Toby allowed me to be there and kind of play with some of the creative that was going on, but it is still very much Toby's film. I think that's an interesting relationship that they ended up creating on that film, making a fantastic one. But hearing that, it was such an odd thing for Universal to say, no, you can't have two films directed the same year, so you can't direct that one too. It was kind of just a weird thing. I don't know. You don't hear that very often, at least nowadays.
It feels very much like Tobe Hooper directed Steven Spielberg's film. And that's it. That's just the visual tone, the visual style of the film, the way the camera moves, the decisions that were made. It feels like a Steven Spielberg film to me. Say what you will, Steven. Production design, James Bissell. Set decoration, Jackie Carr.
This was an interesting film. You don't realize watching this film how much of it is on stages. All the forest stuff is just, anything with really E.T. moving around was on a stage because they needed to have the whole stilted set so that E.T.'s parts could all be kind of making him work underneath. Really interesting that it was designed that way. I mean, but it makes perfect sense. It's just, I have never thought about it in context of being a stage film. It always feels so very present in its locations. I think they did a great job kind of designing all that in a way where you don't even realize it or you don't even think about it.
Totally agree. I think it was just lovely, particularly in the room. It feels like so appropriate, feels so solid. It feels so connected to the neighborhood outside. The transitions were great. Not a complaint. But now we got to talk about the effects.
Oh, yeah.
Beyond just obviously production design and building the sets, the effects to bring the alien to life. Apparently, it was originally going to be Rick Baker and Steven Spielberg had a lot of trouble. Rick Baker apparently had sunk a lot of money into work for Night Skies, and he and Spielberg, when that film stalled, he and Spielberg had words, and they broke up. And so it went to Carlo Rimbaldi. Rimbaldi, we know he did the mechanical head effects of the xenomorph in Aliens and Visitors from Close Encounters, and so lots of good experience. And that brings us the Alien.
E.T., I love him. Just such a great alien. And it's funny hearing them talk about it while they're making the film. They're like, I mean, he's so ugly. They're like, I don't know if people are really going to connect with this little alien thing very much because he's such an ugly little thing. But sometimes those are the things that you connect with the most. We were talking about this a little bit with Oakjaw in that particular trailer, and these creatures that these filmmakers create that are kind of ugly creatures, but when you spend time with them and you kind of get to know them and they have a personality and they can really win you over. And E.T. certainly did that. I mean, I had an E.T. shirt. I had an E.T. lunchbox. I had just everything I could get with E.T. on it when I was a kid because I loved E.T. so much. And it's just, it's such an amazing creature that they came up with. And it makes me pine for that sort of character in a film that has such a presence on screen. Maybe it's just the fact that it was a physical element that was on screen people were reacting with, as opposed to just a CG thing. I mean, that could be a part of it, but I love E.T.
It's the Yoda challenge, right? I love E.T. too, and I love the physicality of it, and I love the presence of it. There's something about it on screen that I just don't feel with a CG character that I know is CG. And we got to see Yoda make the really awkward transition from being a physical present puppet to being a CG model, and it's not the same. It didn't go well.
I would disagree with you. I would argue that Yoda made a great transition from the puppet Yoda to the CG Yoda, but was really hampered by a really terrible, and I don't know why, a really terrible puppet Yoda that they used in Phantom Menace. It was the worst puppet creature I had seen on screen. It was so bad. That puppet Yoda was an embarrassment, and I was so glad when they digitally replaced it.
You're like a traitor to your own aesthetic.
Do you remember that? I love those physical elements, but I don't know. They had already done a great Yoda. Why couldn't they do a great Yoda again? That was the worst Yoda. The Yoda Halloween costume in E.T. looked better than the physical Yoda puppet in the Phantom Menace. It was so bad.
Wow. The only scene I can imagine right now is the last scene in The Phantom Menace where Yoda is talking to Obi-Wan and he's kind of walking across the room. I remember very little of that film. Every time I see it, I forget more of it. And so I honestly feel like I'm incapable of having this conversation with you. All I can say is by the lightsaber battle with Count Dooku, I had lost faith in computer Yoda.
Well, I don't know. I'd much rather have that Yoda. I thought they did actually a pretty good job. I still would prefer the Empire Strikes Back puppet Yoda or the E.T. Halloween costume Yoda.
Or the E.T. Halloween costume Yoda. Okay, that's not the movie we're talking about, but clearly maybe it should be on the list. Back to this. Ralph McQuarrie did the spaceship, said it was supposed to resemble a hot air balloon designed by Dr. Seuss. I love that. And the handwork. I didn't know this. Caprice Roth. I'm going to go with Rota. There's no umlaut. But I do enjoy the flair. It was a mime and was hired to do close-up handwork for E.T. to make the hands feel more sensitive. I like that.
Yeah, and I watched some of the behind-the-scenes footage before I watched it on this latest round, and you really start getting a sense of that when E.T. is grabbing the pot or pulling a little pine tree out of the thing. I started really going, okay, I can get a sense this is where the mime was doing the work here as opposed to the puppet. It's pretty interesting to pay attention to that.
They had 3 actors in for any of the wide shots and the walking shots of E.T. They had 3 actors. They had Tamara Detroit and Pat Bailon. They're little people, and Matthew Demerit, who was a 12-year-old at the time who had been born with no legs and walked on his hands when he was in costume as E.T. Fascinating. I did not know that. Did you see any behind-the-scenes footage on that?
I did, and it was the 12-year-old boy who is the one that they had to play drunk and fall down.
That's dark.
Go for the kid. You're the drunk one.
Yeah. That's darker side of Steven. You know, it would be funny.
That's right.
Followed by Steven Spielberg's ideas.
Right, exactly.
Okay, can't talk about E.T. without talking about the terrible, terrible, terrible decision of the Mars Incorporated companies who decided not to allow them to use M&Ms in the movie.
Right.
Oh,
So
you
funny.
dopes.
And now Reese's Pieces are one of my favorite candies.
Hello, Hershey. This was it, right? This was the beginning of Reese's Pieces. It was their newest creation, and they were looking for a quick start. It was to compete with M&M's, and they agreed to pay $1 million for the rights to promote the use of their product in E.T. And when that became the alien candy of choice, it became the candy of choice for millions of children everywhere.
That was probably the fastest $1 million earned back.
Yeah, right?
for an
Immediately saw, they say that they reported a 65% increase in profits on Reese's Pieces within, go ahead, guess the time.
I'd say a week.
2 weeks.
2
weeks after the
man.
premiere, 65% increase in profits on Reese's Pieces.
Yeah.
That's
And still,
awesome.
I still eat them every time I go to movies. I love them.
Do you really?
Oh, I love Reese's Pieces. I don't really eat them every time I go to the movies, but I wish I could.
Oh, man. If we weren't going so long already, I'd really want to dive into your candy of choice at the movies. But we're going to talk about that later. For now, let's talk about Carol Littleton, who did the editing of this film.
Yeah, just solid work. I just wanted to point out one quick edit bit that I have always loved in this film, and it's the moment when the kids are on their bikes and the cops or the FBI, they have the guns and they're in the street and the kids are about to be shut down, and then you get the music building, and then you get that slow push on Elliot's face, but then it cuts, and then it cuts, and every time it cuts, it jumps a little closer and jumps a little closer. What a way to build tension. I have always found that one of my favorite bits of editing in a film, and I think it works so effectively, and I just love it. Kudos, Carol and Steven, for coming up with it.
Absolutely agree. And one of the reasons it works so well is because she doesn't do any of those kinds of tricks elsewhere in the film.
Yeah, right. It's not overdone.
Right. John Williams. If this wasn't the best Indiana Jones score, I don't know what is.
I don't even know what that means.
Come on, tell me you weren't thinking of Indiana Jones the entire movie. This was the period where he was writing very thematically similar scores.
I don't think it's similar. I think it's its own unique entity, and I've never thought. I mean, obviously he composed both of them, and they were a year apart. But I don't feel that emotionally they are going down the same path. So while they sound like John Williams, certainly I've never gone, oh, this is totally Indiana Jones.
I am stunned, sir. Shocked and awed. I almost want to recut the movie with the Raiders score. I don't think you would notice. I think I could, even after we have this conversation out loud, I could send it to you and you would say, oh, I love the ET score.
You would like to think that you could do that, but they are so different. They are so vastly different scores. The themes in this one, I mean, the two main themes are just such beautiful themes, and it's just incredible bits of music. And I mean, if anything, I'd say it's probably kind of like the FBI theme that you're feeling might be a little more on the Indiana Jones side of things. But the
oh, there we go. You're getting there. You're getting there. See how similar they are? They are so different, to use your language, that they actually come back around to become the same again. That's how different they are. They're so different, they're the same, Andy. You just said it. I'm okay moving on.
Totally different. I love it. But John Williams, I mean, this was big stuff. This was the time when he was coming up with some of these just most amazing themes of his career. And this was one of his, just a huge, huge album for him. And it was just, it's just this was his fourth Oscar win. I mean, he really did just a great job with the score, coming up with just some of the most iconic music ever, just the E.T. theme. And I mean, pairing his music with the shot of Elliot and E.T. flying through the sky, I mean, right in front of the moon. I mean, it's so iconic that Spielberg ended up using it for his company. It's just such an incredible moment in cinema, and you'll always see it in any sort of compilation of great movie scenes, because it is just such an iconic moment. And I think a lot of that comes from what John Williams did with his score here. And leading into the awards, I mean, John Williams certainly received his share of the booty for this particular film. And, well deserved, I think. But, he wasn't the only one. I mean, the film had 51 wins and 32 other nominations. At the Oscars, it had 9 nominations and 4 wins. It ended up winning for Best Sound, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Music Original Score. I thought it was pretty fun that for both the Best Visual Effects and Best Sound Effects Editing, they ended up competing against and beating Poltergeist, Spielberg's other little film. And then, like I said, John Williams won an Oscar, his 4th Oscar for Best Score. It was nominated also for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing, Screenplay written directly for the screen, Best Cinematography, and Best Film Editing, all of which lost to Gandhi, the big kind of the award sort of film that it was competing against. I haven't seen Gandhi in so long, I really can't compare the two, but personally, E.T. is the one that's always been closer to my heart. But going back to the subject of this series, Melissa Mathison, she had, for this particular script of hers, she had 3 wins and 4 other nominations. So she did pretty well. She did win at the WGA Awards for Best Original Screenplay. And I thought it was interesting that at the 2000 PGA Awards, the Producers Guild Awards, Kathleen Kennedy and Steven Spielberg were entered into the PGA Hall of Fame because of this movie.
And not a day of golf between them.
Look at that. PGA jokes, folks. That's what we're here for.
That's why we're here. Why is there no E.T. sequel, Andy?
I wish more filmmakers acted the way Spielberg did. They tried, the Universal, of course, everybody wanted to make a sequel, and they really were struggling trying to come up with something. They had an idea, but Spielberg finally said, it's not going to work. It's not coming together. And then he said, it would just ruin what we already have. It would do nothing but rob the original of its virginity. And I wish more filmmakers would say things like that about their films instead of all this glut of sequels and prequels and everything else that we have to deal with right now.
Film definitely spawned a lot of other stuff, though.
Yes. Do you remember the E.T. storybook album from '82?
That I don't.
It was Michael Jackson narrating it. Quincy Jones produced it with music by John Williams. And it came out the same year. It actually came out the same month as Michael Jackson's Thriller, which I thought was really interesting. That it was like these two things, the big things for, cultural icons that ended up kind of hitting at the same time. And I guess it actually created a lawsuit that I thought was interesting. Epic, that released Thriller, said that Michael Jackson could be a part of this, but they had these stipulations for MCA that it could not be released the same month as Thriller, and it could not, there's a song on the album called Someone in the Dark, and it could not be released as a single. MCA broke both of those conditions. They released it the same month, and they put Someone in the Dark on a single. And there was this, this big lawsuit, and MCA has had to pull all their copies. MCA was banned from ever working with Michael Jackson. And the song "Someone in the Dark," they had to get rid of all those copies and everything. And I guess that the promo copies that they made for "Someone in the Dark," they've become one of Michael Jackson's rarest, most sought after records. Some selling for over $1,500.
Oh my God!
For a single of this one song, and I guess the song ended up getting included as a bonus track on the 2001 special edition of Thriller. So it is out there now if you do want to hear "Someone in the Dark." But I don't know how easy it is to find the album. I think it would be kind of a fun thing to track down, but I've never looked.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the 20th anniversary release of the film? It ended up being pretty controversial.
Yeah, it was somewhat controversial. I think it was just Spielberg kind of doing his own thing, that kind of his own Lucas, so to speak. I mean, if you watch the 20th anniversary, I didn't watch it for this. I watched the original. But this is the one that, the controversy really was around him, changing things that he felt were a little, he wouldn't have made those decisions if he had made the movie today. Like when the FBI agents are about to block the kids, they all have shotguns, and then he changed those to walkie-talkies for for the re-release. He also changed when Michael was dressed as a terrorist. He changed the line. Instead of terrorist, I think they made him, I can't remember what they called him, but it wasn't a terrorist. And so those were kind of like the some of the bigger talked about things, but they did more CG work on E.T.'s face so that they made his mouth move a little better. They added back in the scene where E.T. takes a bath. They had problems on set of doing that because the E.T. Figure got waterlogged, and it just kind of the whole thing started falling apart when it came out of the tub. So it never worked, but they had shot the whole scene. It's kind of like the Jabba scene from Star Wars. They had the scene, they just didn't have the effects, and so they added that back in. And then Spielberg wanted to add back in moments where E.T. was like running instead of just the little red light behind the bushes zipping along in the beginning. You actually see E.T. hopping along, and I mean they made him look like he moves kind of like a gorilla, and it just never seemed like that's how E.T. should actually move. But just a lot of those things that I was not that keen on. So I'm very happy that Spielberg, unlike George Lucas, makes his both versions available. So you can, as long as you know what you're looking for, you can find the right version.
Yeah, and he has been fairly adamant about his position on that, and this is the part that I like, and I think you resonate with too. In 2011, he said, there's going to be no more digital enhancements or digital additions to anything based on any film I direct.
Hallelujah.
Thank you. When people ask me which E.T. they should look at, I always tell them to look at the original 1982 E.T. If you notice, when we put out E.T., we put out two E.T.s. We put out the digitally enhanced version with the additional scenes, and for no extra money in the same package, the original 82 version. Yeah, hallelujah. Obviously, this film is a success. How did it do in the numbers?
Yeah, Spielberg's personal little alien film only cost $10.5 million to make, which is about $26 million in today's dollars. Incredibly impressive for what we know it to be now, but probably quite a bit more than Universal would have liked to spend, considering they thought it was just a kids' movie. After some successful previews and an explosively positive reception in an out-of-competition screening at Cannes, the movie was released June 11th, 1982, with only Grease 2 as its competition. Funny pairing. In case we didn't say it enough before, this movie did blow up, far exceeding everyone's expectations. It ended up remaining number one at the box office domestically for 12 straight weeks. Then it danced around the top 10 for the next 45 weeks, only slipping out 5 times. And hitting number one again 5 other times as late as its 25th week in theaters. So yes, December, it was still hitting number one. All in all, from what I can tell, it looks like it had a domestic theatrical run of 52 weeks. That's right, a full year in the theaters. I know.
Wow.
Including a 1985 re-release and its 20th anniversary rejiggered release. It went on to make just over $435 million domestically and almost $358 million internationally, for a total of almost $793 million, or $1.974 billion in today's dollars. In 1983, it flew past Star Wars as the highest-grossing film of all time. Held on to this number one spot until Spielberg's Jurassic Park knocked it off in 1993 globally, and then Star Wars reclaimed its spot domestically during its special edition re-release. E.T. has provided the third best return on investment that we've talked about on this show so far, just behind Mad Max and Gone with the Wind, making 75 times its budget back. And also third when it comes to the highest adjusted profit per finished minute, just behind Gone with the Wind and The Exorcist, raking in $16.6 million adjusted per minute. All in all, this little alien sure proved it knew how to touch people's hearts and showed the world once again that Spielberg was a cinematic master.
That is amazing. 52 weeks.
1 year.
They do not do that anymore.
No, they don't.
I think it's time, Andy. It's truly time. We've got to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, or you can just swipe over in the show notes and you'll see a link to Flickchart. Right there, you can just tap on it. It'll take you right to this movie. You can add it to your collection, and let's see how it stacks up next to ours.
First up, E.T. or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
E.T., please, Andy.
E.T. for me. E.T. or Raise the Red Lantern?
Oh, E.T. for me.
A little dose of E.T. E.T. or 101 Dalmatians? I'm going to go
another
with E.T.
E.T., yeah.
E.T. or Children of Men? I'm going
definitely
with
E.T. Yeah.
E.T. or Groundhog Day? I'm still going E.T.
Yeah, I think so, but it's getting harder.
It is getting harder. E.T. or Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb?
Dr. Strangelove.
I'm going to say E.T.
You can't say E.T. Dr. Strangelove is your favorite movie, Andy.
No, Brazil is my favorite movie. Dr. Strangelove, I was on the fence if it might be my new favorite movie, and I don't think it ended up quite being there, but it is way up there. But E.T.
So now you're saying that E.T. is ahead of it, and Brazil is still, well, I guess we shall see.
That's right, we shall see.
Well, I'm Dr. Strangelove on this one.
Well, let's do it then.
All right, here we go.
One,
two, three. Rock.
Scissors. Oh, you crushed
There
me.
you go. There
That
you go.
hurts.
There you go.
E.T. or Seven.
7.
7, yep.
Yeah.
So, sorry, E.T. E.T. or Serenity. E.T. for me.
I'll give it to E.T.
Look at that. E.T. is now number 7, just behind 7 on our Flick Chart list. Shouldn't 7 be 7? 7 is 6.
7 is 6. That's great. That's a good place for it
Yes,
to fall,
it
and it's the right place. Anything higher
Absolutely.
would have been a travesty. I'm glad someone was here to stop that.
Oh, yeah.
I already broke ranks. I told you where I am. It's been on my letterbox for a long time now, so the secret is out. It's definitely a 5-star and a heart for me at letterbox.com/thenextreel. Yeah.
Absolutely. Same here. It's just really close to my heart, and I really love this film. So definitely 5 stars and a big old like.
I think we just have the one more film in our
That's
Melissa
right.
Mathison series. And what is that?
We're going to be wrapping it up with Martin Scorsese's film Kundun. It's going to be a very interesting film to talk about. As if we hadn't said it a few times on the show in the past, this is a tricky one to track down. So if you do want to watch this and then tune into the show, make sure you start hunting because it can be a challenge.
Absolutely. Check your library.
That's
and
probably
while
where you're
you're-
going to find it, yeah.
Yeah. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go to bed.
All right, man. Well, I heard a noise out back. I'm going to go out and lay on the chaise lounge out back with my flashlight and, see if I can spot a little ET of my own.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
It's tough to find low star ratings for this movie, but we did manage to do it.
We did. Oh, yes, we did.
Mine was more therapy. If you don't mind, I'd like to go first.
Yeah, go for it.
This is 1 star, and it's very, very simple. From April 7th, 2017. Very recent viewing. And the review is terrifying. Tried to watch it to get over my 26-year-long phobia and just couldn't do it.
So it's like failed therapy.
Yeah,
It's like
truly. This is therapy that didn't work. Yeah.
Therapist said to go try this, and it didn't work, and now they're going to be in therapy for another 26 years.
Right. Of course, maybe because they were watching it, Clockwork Orange style, with their eyelids peeled open. That's
Could
why
be,
it
could be.
didn't take. What's yours?
Well, I got a 2-star by an owner who says, E.T. go home. I had forgotten how ho-hum this movie is. Maybe only kids should judge it. This is where it gets. Help me understand this one, Pete. When I was a kid, bicycle ETs were no good. On the other hand, 3-story high grasshoppers eating Chicago was cool. But that's just me.
What?
When I was a kid, bicycle ETs were no good. On the other hand, 3-story high grasshoppers eating Chicago was cool, but that's just me.
Wow. I don't know what to say to that. So the grasshoppers eating Chicago. That there's a movie in there. That's my sense is it's beginning of the end from 1957.
I don't know, but I typed grasshoppers eating Chicago into Google, and it just came out, where to eat insects in Chicago. The best grasshopper restaurant in Chicago. Clearly, I need to define that search a little better.
Well, this is the write-up of it started Peter Graves. So this was a real thing. It's about an agricultural scientist who successfully grown gigantic vegetables using radiation. Unfortunately, the vegetables are eaten by locusts, which grow to gigantic size and attack the city of Chicago. It's generally recognized for its, quote, atrocious special effects and considered to be one of the most poorly written and acted science fiction motion pictures of the 1950s. So there is that.
There you go.
So here we have somebody who says bicycle ETs were no good, and grasshoppers eating Chicago in what is widely considered to be one of the worst movies ever made on the subject is actually cool.
Says a lot, doesn't it? But that's just me.
Thanks, Amazon.
It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know. You're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.